So, welcome to Belarus, to Minsk, Tomasz,
Yes, hello.
lead artist of 11-bit studio. So, what led you into game development?
Well, I was a gamer and I was studying architecture, and that was where I felt like actually combining those two, I can have a very nice career and also do something I love. Because I think previously I didn't think about it as a career choice. It was more of a hobby. But as the also gaming development industry in Poland was growing, I felt like, yeah, I can go this way, and that was like one of the best decisions in my life.
So, the first question all gamers would like to ask you, as of anyone from game industry, what is your first favorite game and why?
Wow, my first favorite game. I think it was Doom. And actually, but my father was playing it. It wasn't me. He was an architect, and he had a PC very early on. Very early on, I was like 3 or 4 years old, I think. And he had a PC in our house. It was like 1994, maybe 1995. And I was watching him playing, and I was really scared, but I also was excited. So when I got a little older, I took the mouse and the keyboard and played it.
Oh, awesome. So, was that the game which made you interested in the whole the industry, or there's some other game which made you think, "Hey, I want to do that"?
Well, for sure, I didn't think about that as my personal career when I was like 4 or 5 years old. But yeah, I mean, from that point, I think I found some kind of love for the games, and I started playing from that point. Getting more into console gaming later when consoles like grew bigger in Poland, because of course in the 90s it was all PCs, and yeah, I think it grew from that point for sure.
You know, it was 11-bit your first company, or did you have some other companies you cooperated with before you met the studio?
Yeah, well, 11-bit Studios was like the first company for real, like seriously working in game dev. I was doing during my university times. I was doing some indie projects, but it was more like collaboration with friends and learning the stuff I was able to put into my professional work later on. So yes, 11-bit is like the first company fully full-time professionally.
So, how was it?
How was 11-bit and getting there?
Yes,
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, I love it, and I love the games we're making, and I was a big fan of those games before I went there. So, actually, when I decided to like pivot my career from architecture into game development, I felt like this is the company I want to start with because they do what I love, and so I applied and get there. And from that point, it was an amazing journey that led me to this point today.
what can you say about Polish game industry? 11-bit is one of the many companies in Poland, uh, but Belarusians don't know much about Polish game industry. Could you describe it in a few words?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's growing fast. It's growing. It's already quite big. Of course, it all has this Witcher 3 effect, right? Because of CD Projekt Red and how successful is that company. But there are others just a little bit behind, like us, for example. There is also Techland and many other companies doing great jobs. Like something that all those big and middle-sized companies in Poland have in common is like the good quality of the games. That's the sort of craftsmanship into what we're doing with our games. That's quite amazing. There are like I feel like there are no lazy projects in Poland, at least at this higher level.
You worked on a lot of famous titles of 11-bit studios. Um, which is your personally favorite at the moment?
Oh, this war of mine, like no question asked. I mean, I love Frostbank and I loved working on Frostbank. It's super interesting project, but this war of mine I was a huge fan of the game, and I was then later on able to work on it and work on it still right now as we're working on some DLCs to the title and just expanding the brand.
That's really good to hear. And knowing that, perhaps you can name few of the most significant, to your point of view, Polish developers' games, besides The Witcher, of course, which is famously known throughout the world.
Yeah, besides Witcher, I loved People Can Fly games. I don't know if you remember a game called Painkiller, but you as a fan of Doom and some fast-paced shooters, I guess, you might remember it was a first-person shooter. It was before the Witcher era, and I think it was the biggest Polish game at that point. And later on, they also did some very interesting stuff. Bulletstorm.
Awesome.
It was a game that maybe was not such a great commercial success, but it was very fun, and I loved the game. Also, things made by the astronauts, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, a super interesting game from last few years. There's a lot going on. Last year, the Reiner, Get Even, and Observer. There were like 3 games last year, very interesting projects from Poland. And what's I think it's quite interesting about our industry is that more companies are growing outside of Warsaw, which is good, I think, for the industry.
Did you know anything about Belarusian game industry before you came here?
Well, I knew World of Tanks, for sure. It's like that. That's like the big one, right? I knew World of Tanks. I also knew that part of the game is being made outside of Belarus, but that would be it. I don't think I knew much more than the fact that World of Tanks is the big one.
What games are you waiting for? Yeah.
I'm really curious about the Last of Us Part 2. I'm just thinking about the trailers from The Last of 3, and it was amazing. I loved the first part, and the trailer was stunning. Of course, I'm waiting for Cyberpunk. That's everybody's so excited for it.
In Poland especially.
Yeah, in Poland also. Yeah, for sure. I'm actually really curious about the Spider-Man that's coming out in September. So, but it's all about like AAA titles. And the most curious I'm about our next project. I can't tell you much about it, but it's in development and it looks cool. So you should really get excited about it.
Any insight about the style, at least, or genre of a future project?
Unfortunately, that's like super secret.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm already excited. What will you speak about tonight?
Oh, today I'll be speaking about some narrative tropes in graphic design, and actually how narrative design and gameplay design can interact with art department and how they can profit and benefit from each other. But I don't want to spoil too much. So that's the main framework for the lecture.
Oh yeah, people should attend meetups to know that. And narrativism is quite a new term for Belarusian game developers. As you know, our market mainly developed for casual games, and maybe you can expand on what is narrativism for game industry, for developer, how important it is.
Well, you see, me as a graphic designer and working in the art department, for me it's important to provide good support for all the narrative decisions that design department creates, because every game with strong and unique ideas, they need to have also strong and quite distinct visuals to stand on. So I'm really interested in that collaboration. Sometimes I feel like that's something that's forgotten, and I will be very happy to elaborate on that today. But yes, that's that continuity between those two departments. That's what it really is a point of my interest.
What is the best advice you've been giving in game design, in your work in game development? Choose one.
Best advice: be careful with colors.
What is the worst advice?
The worst advice.
Forget about colors.
Forget about colors. That would be a nice one. Yeah, I think I would have to think about it a little bit. You know, because I was working with 11-bit, I actually didn't have many bad advisors. I just was lucky to have good advisors that I could actually benefit from a lot.
Are there some kind of few commandments, like 3, for example, 2 or 3 or maybe 4, first like main advices you would give to game developers? You've been part of awesome projects which are very deep, meaningful, and maybe there are some things you would advise to game developers to take into account.
No, I think you've already said it. I mean, like, do something that matters. Be creative about it. You have to step out of your box for sure, but something that's creative and unique and has a meaning into it. It also has a potential to be successful.
Games turned into movies. Your opinion, and would you want to make movies, for example, on Frostpunk or The War of Mine?
So games turned into movies, like movies based on the games. Well, that's a problem. I mean, I love cinema, and actually, I'm quite sad that there's like hardly any good movie based on a game so far. There are some plans for the Uncharted movie, and I love Uncharted series, but I'm not sure how such a cinematic experience, how can you transfer it into a film? Like, it's already so cinematic, right?
Have you seen
Actually, I
the
feel
short,
like,
the short
yeah?
version already? The teaser?
Yeah, that was so funny. Yeah, but it's a fun project. And Nathan Fillion, who did like it.
He's wonderful. Yeah.
He's such a cool guy.
He's still Malcolm Reynolds, whoever he plays.
True that. But I would love to see Frostpunk as a TV series, for example.
That could be awesome. Can good game be made without narrative approach?
Well, for sure, because there are so many genres that it definitely is possible. That's just, I think that's not something that's in my interest. But yeah, I mean, there are many cases of interesting games without any narration. That's just, I think these are not the ones I'm playing.
What do you think is future after technologically in the game industry? Do you think some technologies will die out and people should go after the newest technology, or should they just take into account new ones while using the old ones?
I wouldn't go too far about thinking that some technologies will go off. Because what I feel is like we tend to have retro stuff all the time, like those new Super Nintendo Entertainment System selling like crazy. So I feel like we're quite safe there. Of course, we have new stuff and VR, etc., and it's super exciting. But I don't think, even if VR finally gets successful, I don't think it's gonna mean that, I don't know, gamepads or keyboards are dead and things like this. Like, the cinema is doing quite well, and still we read some newspapers. I think we're safe there.
And will you be glad to see some of our students visiting on some field trip 11-bit studios if we'll be allowed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, you're always welcome.
What do you think? Is it possible for like Belarusian young specialists to find out more about game industry in Poland and, for example, to cooperate with studios like 11-bit? Are they interested in getting Belarusian specialists to work, and vice versa, to open like divisions perhaps, or something?
Yeah, I think 11-bit and other companies in Poland, we are growing in scale, and we are constantly in need of good specialists, and we are opening to also some markets abroad. So there are people coming from the Eastern Bloc all the time, and having an amazing impact into the work we're doing. So I think I can't speak, of course, for all the studios, but I feel like we're quite open for that possibility.
What advices also, I mean, not only in game development, but to a community, would you give to Belarusian game developers?
To a community, again, to be very open, I would say, to be open for new ideas on a more higher level, right? Not like the story pitch level, but be open to some collaborations, and be open also to advisors from the outside to get a lot of inspiration from many different directions.
Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for this interview.